16th. That is what ESPN has ranked UCF's offseason after a myriad of changes. Is it justified, or do the Knights need to be higher on the list? Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Charge On. As always, I am your host, Sean Green. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, happy Friday. Nick Geddes joins me. And listen, Nick sent me the article. I didn't see the article or the ranking, whatever you want to look at, before Nick sent it to me. He thought it'd be a good topic for the show. And knowing both of us on, this is going to create a lot of conversation. But we'll get into it. But they have UCF ranked 16th. We're going to go through some of the teams that maybe caught our eye. But Nick, how are we doing? It's middle of May. We're kind of getting to that point where, I mean, June, July, August, we're almost to fall camp and a few short months, and recruiting's definitely going to pick up here in the next couple of weeks. But how you doing? And when you saw this list or ranking, whatever, we'll discuss it. Were you shocked in the slightest?
Well, first of all, I thought it was at first I thought this was a ranking. I thought this was like an off-season, like where things stand, power ranking going into the season. And then, of course, you click on the article and you read, which I encourage everybody to do that with everything. And it is more of a power ranking of how everyone's off-season went. And when I saw UCF was at 16, I was like, damn, did they really have the worst off-season in the Big 12 conference? I mean, there's 16 teams, and I was like, did they really have the worst one? And I read through it. I'm like, I found there was a little excerpt there in the UCF section that I was not aware of, actually. And I went, wow, that does kind of make sense. So they might have had the worst in the conference. I don't know.
And listen, we'll get to it. I think there's a lot of areas that they focus on, which kind of hurts UCF's case for this, again, quote unquote ranking. But we'll get into it. First, I want to address something, because we had a comment on last week's video about channel memberships. I want to quickly say before we get into the ranking, any of you that are loyal listeners or fans and want to become a channel member, we would greatly appreciate it. We've got a lot of exciting stuff coming up in the next couple months that I think if I were a fan of just UCF in general, you definitely want to become a channel member. A lot of new series that we're going to be dropping, a lot of exclusive content, a Discord coming potentially. So there's some stuff in the works. I understand if you don't want to join now, those things are about a month or so away where you're going to start getting a bunch of this stuff, probably around June, July. But just like I said, want to get you guys informed and keep you guys on the lookout so you know when that stuff drops. If you become a channel member now, you get videos early, so that's a positive, but definitely be on the lookout and become a channel member here at the Charge On podcast. All right. Now let's talk about UCF being 16th in this ESPN article. We have linked the article down below where you can kind of read a lot of the reasoning behind this. But when we were looking at it, like me and Nick said, we thought it was a power ranking for a way too early power ranking in May of where they thought the teams were listed. But this is focused on 3 areas for the offseason, which was 1, retention of key non-draft eligible players, 2, retention of key coaches or staff upgrades, and 3, player additions primarily through the transfer portal, but also high school recruits. No offense, but if we were just to read that outright and not go through the analysis, which we're going to go through it, if you looked at UCF's offseason, those 3 metrics, UCF would fail in almost every single area. You lost your head coach. You lost the entire staff except one who got, kept by Scott Frost. You lost most of your freshman class. Didn't have many stay. You had a couple stay. Most of them left. And most of your key players that were obviously not going to the draft left. You have a brand new roster. So, Nick, when you look at those metrics and you look at that analysis, before we go into it, does that kind of set UCF up for failure when you go off of those 3 points?
I don't think it sets you up for failure. I mean, it's just sort of like the it's just sort of the criteria of which they ranked this. I like how they put the criteria in there because sometimes this stuff can be subjective a little bit. But yeah, I don't think it necessarily like sets them up for failure or anything. I look at now their off season and I like having it like listed out like this where every team's next to each other. And this is just a little bit like you can do even more research on it, but you can get a little bit of a feel for what UCF was able to do this off season, what some of the teams they're competing with did as well. And I already had mentioned there was a little key point in there that I went, wow, I did not know that. Lowest returning production levels in the conference from last year. Lowest returning. And I suppose that makes sense because the offense last year was a two-man show. Most of the time it was a one-man show, and both those players are gone. So do they have any returning? Now I think of it. Outside of Miles Montgomery, is there any returning production on offense? That's it, right?
I mean, in terms of like actual high quality, like catching more than 5 passes in a season, no. Everybody is brand new.
Who caught 5 passes that is still here?
Well, I was more so setting 5 as like the benchmark because you have Kylan Fox, who I can't remember exactly how many he caught, but he caught.
I know what you mean. Yeah, he was out there. Though. I got you.
In terms of starter level and backup level, nobody is returning. So that doesn't
nobody's returning. So you have no returning production from offense last year. And then they where was it at here? They lost 34 scholarship players, including 11 starters. The interesting thing, they lost 34 players total, but they brought in 34 too. So they did replace those players, but we just don't know anything about these players yet. So
positive. They lost 34 players, but they added through the transfer portal 34.
They added 34 positive. More through the portal. So yeah.
Listen, I think this is a greater conversation. Originally, I was going to go into how college football looks at Scott Frost. And I think we could still go into that conversation because though this is based off of off-season and all that stuff, at the end of the day, I think a lot of us covering the team and seeing what UCF did, we looked at it as, in terms of just everything that's happened, this was a positive offseason. Like, to lose the amount of players you did, to bring in guys that you think have potential and can come in and make an impact. You hire Scott Frost. You put together a staff very quickly that many think might work, but also are very skeptical. Alex Grinch being the one that people are kind of shaking their head on, like, how is this a thing? So, listen, they said the biggest... I
almost forgot it was a thing, to be honest.
Well, if you've been on Twitter recently, even like the last week, people have been posting just random college football accounts have been posting Alex Grinch's picture and being like, you remember this is still a thing, and it's him getting hired by UCF. So it's the running joke. It's going to become more of a running joke when, come August. But let's get to like kind of what they're saying for UCF at 16. And I think we'll get to like the additions, departures, and incoming recruits. But the biggest coaching move, which I think we all know, is they replaced their head coach with Scott Frost. But it says Scott Frost is back at the program. He elevated to national prominence with a 13-0 season in 2017. Frost, out of college football since being fired by Nebraska early in the 2022 season, oversees a coaching staff with notable names such as defensive coordinator Alex Grinch, offensive line coach Sean Clark, and quarterbacks coach Mackenzie Milton, the former UCF star. It says Connolly's take, who's the guy that's doing the article. Last time Frost took over in Orlando, he was inheriting pieces from an 0-12 team. So it has been worse. But UCF has the lowest returning production levels in the conference, and Frost will start out with an offense that boasts almost literally no proven pieces. This renovation might take a little while. So that's what I want to start with. And I want fans, especially the hardcore fans that are thinking Frost, like, we've tried to gradually hold hands and say, listen, this is going to be a rebuild year. The positive would be UCF makes a bowl game, and by all accounts, you'd be ahead of schedule. But you also have to take into account the national perception on Scott Frost. The national perception is not UCF 2017. The perception is he bombed at Nebraska and was one of the worst college football coaches there ever, but also in his tenure, in his 5-year span, he was one of the worst college football coaches in the country. It's going to take some time, Nick, for that perception. Again, if you remember, when Gus Malzahn got hired, there was no, if UCF was getting ranked in the Big 12 bracket or whatever of best off seasons, the coaching wouldn't really have taken that big of a dip, even if they lost all the production, because you assume bringing in a guy like Gus Malzahn, he's going to just keep, bringing in high recruits, and that's going to kind of continue that momentum. I think, Nick, the national perception coupled with the fact of losing basically all your production tanks UCF to the bottom here, even though we might think it was a positive offseason after everything that happened.
Yeah, and I think the reason why I really agree with you there, and I think you're onto something there, is now West Virginia is not much higher in this ranking. I think they're like 13th. But I would tell you that the national reaction to that reunion between Rich Rodriguez and West Virginia, don't you feel like it's been way more positive?
Yes.
And it's been way more like, oh, this is such a cool homecoming. And why is that? Well, it's because Rich Rodriguez was still coaching all this time, and he was coaching really well, and they were winning games at Jacksonville State while he was there. And then now he's back at West Virginia. He was at a big program before, kind of like Scott Frost was, and it didn't work out. Also was ridden with controversy at Michigan, that was. But yeah, I think because of that, I do agree with you. I think a lot of people on the outside, they look at the Scott Frost thing and they're like, well, it's a honeymoon, but is it really going to work? Is this really the right move? Like, I think there's probably some people out there who still look at Gus Malzahn and go, oh, why did that work out? Is it really Gus's fault? Is it this and that? Because he carries this sort of like credibility to him. We know, as those who watched and, covering the program, why it didn't work. But absolutely, I think that's a lot that like Scott Frost is up against from an outside narrative standpoint.
You brought up West Virginia, and I think that's a perfect talking point into coupling this conversation. So their biggest coaching move, obviously, like Nick mentioned, was Rich Rodriguez. And he was at Jack State. I think they were 9-4 last year, had a really good year, a very tough team, very tough out. It said Rich Rodriguez is back at his alma mater 17 years after his infamous departure to Michigan. His staff is filled with notable names, including assistant quarterbacks coach Pat White, the former West Virginia University star, and Jeff Castile, the Mountaineers' former defensive coordinator. Rodriguez also brought in defensive coordinator Zach Alley, who held the same role under Rodriguez at Jacksonville State before spending last fall at Oklahoma. Connolly's take for West Virginia is Rodriguez was not shy in both bringing players from and seemingly sending players to the portal. West Virginia could have as many as 19 or 20 new starters in 2025, though between Alley and a few Jacksonville State transfers, he'll recognize at least some of the faces around him. So let's compare West Virginia to UCF in that take. That take is saying, hey, he's bringing a lot of notable faces from the coaching staff as well as to the actual roster from Jack State to West Virginia. So it's not going to be like you are basically starting from scratch. You're bringing people that you've worked with and you are very comfortable with. Scott Frost did something similar with a lot of the coaches. A lot of the coaches on the staff he has worked with. But compared to Rich Rodriguez, it's nowhere close. Defensive coordinator, he's never worked with. Linebackers coach, never worked with. Cornerbacks coach, never worked with. Mackenzie Milton was his quarterback. That's the guy that he knows the most. Besides that, it's a bunch of guys on the staff that either he knew in some capacity at Nebraska or are brand new. And then couple that with the 34 brand new players on the roster that you're plucking from the transfer portal, some of which have already gone into the portal. I think that's where maybe, Nick, the divide is, and where a lot of people are looking at UCF, and we'll get into the Taven Jackson conversation, but a lot of people are looking at UCF not as a dumpster fire, but basically is like a blank slate, a clean slate that this year is not going to be good just because of all of the change around the program.
Well, look at it like this. Forget everything that you know about UCF from last year, even last year. Forget everything you know of it because it doesn't exist. Look at the roster right now. Yeah, you'll see a few familiar faces from last year, but by and large, this team is completely different. So forget everything. It is completely like starting over. It is like UCF right now is like this brand new thing of clay. And now Scott Frost has come in, he's coming with his own coaching staff, and now it has to be molded into something, into his vision. And there's so much, we've been talking about this all offseason, obviously. There are so many moving parts here. There's so much newness to this. You look at some of the players on your team, like, I'm still getting used, like, I got to be honest, Sean, I'm still getting used to this roster. Like, I still have to pull up the roster every time because I'm like, there's so many like new players and everything. And like we already mentioned it, like the offense, for example, you have a completely new offensive line outside of like one position, and that's Paul Rubel. The entire skill positions have changed. We obviously know that there's 3 new quarterbacks that are in the program now. It's just so much new. So like from an outsider standpoint, and by the way, a lot of these players they brought in, they're not proven producers. In fact, I mean, how many, Sean, do you think are proven producers realistically that they brought in? I mean, they have some production at some like a DJ Black has a lot of production, but it's at Limestone. You know, Jaden Nixon, we saw some production from him at Oklahoma State and then his last stop as well. But who knows, right? And he's probably going to be a backup running back because Miles is going to be the one. There's nobody else in that receiver room that has any proven production at anywhere meaningful right now. So, yeah, if you're looking at it on the outside looking in, you're going, man, it looks pretty steep, tall task for Scott Frost to come in year one and try to make noise in the Big 12.
And that's where it can be frustrating. And, you know, there was so much hype and positive when Scott Frost was hired. And you just assumed, okay, like your old memory brings you back to Scott Frost balling and having his teams ball out at UCF. So it is hard, and you're having to warp your mind to look at this and be like, okay, like the public perception on Taven Jackson. Call it like it is. For some reason, if you go and you look up ranking the Big 12 quarterbacks, Taven Jackson is 16 on almost every single list that you see. From our perspective...
To be fair, I do disagree with that.
You know, I do too. I 100% do. When you see some of the names ahead of Taven Jackson, and granted, we've seen Taven Jackson firsthand. I've seen him firsthand. I've said, I think he would be the best quarterback on UCF's roster last year, by far. And I think he's got really good days, but then he's got some bad days thrown in there. I think if he could find a way to get more into the center and just be average 24/7, I think he's going to be dangerous. I think he's got all the attributes with Scott Frost and Mackenzie Milton to be really, really good. But perception. We might as well just label this episode Perception of UCF, because the perception is Taven Jackson is garbage in the Big 12 quarterback ranking. So again, is it more, and we just said we don't think he's the 16th best quarterback, but do you think because of all the changes, because of the offense that now we don't know who's going to step up, we don't know who the main contributors are. Now we've seen, we might think we do know, but to the public perception, Taven Jackson is the 16th best quarterback, and I think that's coupled with the fact that that's a brand new offense.
And then even if you talk about the defensive side of the ball, what's the reputation for Alex Grinch?
Garbage.
Yeah, I mean, you used a strong word there.
I mean, that's the public perception. Don't twist my word. I'm not saying he's garbage. I'm saying the public perception is he's garbage. Yeah, that's the public perception.
That's probably the public perception. You're right, but and yeah, I mean, and you look at the defense wasn't exactly anything to write home about last year as it was, and then this year you look at it and it's like, again, there's some guys who are NFL camps or that got drafted that were on that defense last year, aren't there? And then, I mean, there's still some returning guys, and they brought in a lot of dudes. I think the production they brought in on defense in the transfer portal, I think far eclipses what they brought in on offense. I would probably tell you that one. I don't think it's even close.
No.
So I'm actually, like, as you sit here today, in a weird way, I'm almost a little bit more optimistic about the defense and how that's going to come along. I can't believe I'm saying that.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm like crazy for it either. I don't think I'm nuts. Like, I genuinely don't. Like, if you ask me today, like, to forecast how it's going to go on offense, who's going to be the leading this, I don't know. Like, I genuinely have no idea. I don't even know if they have a depth chart right now. I have no idea.
I mean, I'll say this again, from what I've seen, I could not tell you who is wide receiver 1. I could not tell you who is wide receiver 2. I have who I think is the most talented, which I've been on record saying is the freshmen by far, I think, are going to be the most talented on roster.
Oh, yeah, that could happen.
But do I think they start? I don't know. And then does that really give anybody confidence in UCF this season if you're trotting out Miles Montgomery coming off of an injury and your starting 2 receivers are true freshmen?
Well, let me say this too, and I want to preface this because I know it sounds like we're like just basically saying this season's going to be a train wreck.
No.
I might be saying that, but I'm not saying it as in like I'm so down on everything and I'm not willing to give this staff a shot. I really am. I knew right away, like, whenever you hire a new coach, and especially the situation that this is and where this school is right now, it's going to take some time. So UCF may very well win 3 games next year. Or 4, whatever, or 5. Are we going to have a meltdown over it like we did for last year's team when they won 4 games? No, I'm not. Because
I'll take 4 wins. Take 4 wins this year. Any day compared to last year.
Yeah, because again, you're starting from scratch right now. If they win 4 games, I don't think anybody's going to come here and just say, "Oh, fire this, fire that. This isn't going to work." Blah blah blah. We have to see this through. You got to be patient. Last year's team winning 4 games was unacceptable. When I go back and look at that roster and I look at the names, and especially where some of these guys ended up to hit the portal, I go, "Wow, 4 wins." 4 wins. How's that happen? But I digress. Yeah. I'll never get over that staff. I just never will. Or that season. But anyway, so I just wanted to get that out there right now. Like, they might stink this year, but I don't think me or you are going to be like sounding the alarm bells or anything. This is just where it's hard for me to come and sit here today and say, yeah, they're going to make a bowl. Like, I can't say that definitively looking at what they have.
No, and obviously when we did our way too early predictions, I think you had them at 5 wins. I had them at 6. And again, way too early. And now we've seen the team. I have no idea. I have zero idea what's going to happen.
Yeah, I will say this too. I mean, we still have to get familiar with our own players too before we can get familiar with all the other teams' players and who they brought in, right? Because there's a lot of turnover. And I feel like that was one of my other takeaways from reading this whole thing is you kind of forget how much talent is gone from the conference. Like, I went through every team and I'm looking at the departures, and I know we just had the draft, Sean, but I forget. I'm like, wow, look at these names, like, and how high they went in the draft. Like, this conference took a big hit this year with the talent. So does that play into UCF's advantage at all a little bit? I mean, some of the other teams got a lot weaker. We know the one team that got much stronger on paper, that's for sure, who are at the top of this ranking. That's Texas Tech, by the way, for those who were wondering. But
they who shall not be named.
Well, who is they who should not be named?
Texas Tech. I just think everybody just assumes they're going to win the conference because they spent how much money on the roster.
I have for 2 years in a row said this is Texas Tech's year, and it has not been Texas Tech's year for the last 2 years. So I'm out until they show me something. I'm not picking them to win the conference this year because I've struck out 0-2 the last 2 years.
Well, listen, I want to read, before we kind of close it out, the what went wrong for UCF, which, I think we all have eyes, and we saw what went wrong, and the what went right. But I want to give some positives. When I read this, you'll kind of get an idea of what they see, the people that maybe aren't covering UCF 24/7. So what went wrong? The transition that Gus Malzahn set off by leaving for the Florida State OC job had quite a cost in terms of roster attrition. The Knights have had 34 scholarship players depart this offseason, including 11 who started games last season. They were hit especially hard along the offensive line, with Adrian Medley going to Florida State, Marcellus Marshall going to Minnesota, Caden Kittler going to Arkansas, and Walt Claire Flynn going to Georgia, moving on. Hunter, an all Big 12 selection, became one of the most coveted players in the portal and landed at Texas Tech. Tight end Randy Pittman also followed Malzahn to the Seminoles, added in a large senior class moving on, and you get a major roster rebuild for Frost and his new staff. To be fair, the offensive line was garbage anyway. So you just
meant now you're calling people garbage.
Now I'm calling it garbage.
That's coming from you.
The offensive line was terrible last season. Like, it's been terrible the last couple years. So you're mentioning they were hit hard on the offensive line. Yes, but I've been on record saying that I think the offensive line and the guys they brought in this offseason are going to easily trump the offensive line last season. Easily. I think
you're saying
center,
that with confidence.
I mean, to be fair, Carter Miller is going to be a better center. I think Paul Rubel having another year under his belt, I think he's going to be really good. I think the guy, Jabari Brooks, can really probably make a name. Keegan Smith. I think all of these guys, from what I've seen. Now, I said the depth, after seeing the depth, might be a little bit of an issue, potentially. And they brought in some guys in this last cycle to help with that. But the starters, I feel way more confident in the starters heading into this season than last season. And they mentioned Walt-Claire Flynn. No offense, I love Walt-Claire Flynn. I said I wanted him to start. I think he's a really talented kid. And yes, he's going to Georgia. He was like the third or fourth string center. So
yeah, I didn't even know Walt-Claire was even in the. I didn't even think he was in contention to start this year.
No, he wasn't. So again, and then you mentioned Randy Pittman. We all love Randy. He was a baller. He was a player. How much offensive production did Randy Pittman bring you last year? I mean, not much. He wasn't. Now, granted, that was not his fault.
Was it his fault?
It was not his fault. I'm just saying, you mentioned all these names. It's like, did UCF... They weren't used in the right way here anyway.
Yeah, it's just because these are all veteran players that have been in the conference and have played a lot of football.
But if you just kept the end of the day, that's what I'm saying. If they're just on the roster now, if you just kept the same players, Nick, no, UCF would be 16th still. They wouldn't view this as a positive offseason for UCF. You'd be like, okay, well, you brought in Scott Frost and you have the same roster that went 4-8 that could have won a lot more games. Like, they lost a lot of close games, to be fair.
I think they were better, though, than what they... Oh, I can't...
They were, but you just lost RJ Harvey. You lost Kobe Hudson. Say UCF kept almost every single player, right? Kept Lee Hunter, kept all of their offensive linemen, but you lose RJ Harvey and Kobe Hudson, and you bring in a Taven Jackson. Nick, you're having the same problems on offense of, okay, like, the offensive line wasn't very good last year, and you got a bunch of skill players that you don't know if they're going to hit. Defensively, okay, you have Lee Hunter, and then you brought in a bunch of guys defensively. I think it'd be the same ranking, in my opinion. I might be wrong. But at this point, you completely shifted the roster. Yeah, you're 16th on this list. But you still have I would
even say, like, of the players that they mentioned here in the article and that you even mentioned, I think the player that's the biggest loss from even just a talent standpoint and a long-term projection thing is not even mentioned here.
I'm trying to think who you're thinking. Who were you thinking?
I think it's still Chase Johnson.
Now
the alternative. Hold on. Notice how I said, from a production standpoint,
sure,
long-term projection, what the player could be, because I'm fully aware that some of the stuff that, you know, the consistently committing and non-committing, and I'm going here, I'm going there, bag chasing, whatever. Like, maybe that's a guy you just don't want in your program. Okay, that might be a thing. I'm just talking strictly about ball when it comes to Chase and Johnson and the hole that I think it leaves back there. But yeah, I don't know, man.
I get it.
I don't know, man. I'm trying to, like, in my head, play this out. It's like, okay, if UCF didn't lose these transfers, if UCF was able to hold on to these names right here, would we be having a different discussion about UCF's outlook this season?
In my opinion,
does it move the needle at all, or no?
In my opinion, no. But let me read what went right, and then we'll close this out. The Knights have attacked their needs well in the portal windows and have loaded up with 34 transfer signees. Frost is working with a rebuilt quarterback room featuring Taven Jackson, who started 6 games at Indiana, competing with Jakari Brown, Cam Fancher, and Davi Belford. Running back Jaden Nixon, a first-team All-MAC pick at Western Michigan last season, will try to help replace Harvey's production. There are lots of new faces at receiver and on the offensive line, and Alex Grinch is working with 16 new transfers on defense. All valid points. I'm not disagreeing with what is said in the article. All I'm saying is, I think if you brought back the same offensive line as last season, and defensively, again, you were losing guys to the NFL draft and to being seniors anyway. So the only difference this offseason has compared to what it would have been is if you kept basically your starting offensive line and a couple guys on defense like Lee Hunter stayed, then we're having maybe a different conversation. But then you are, again, talking about a 4-8 football team.
It doesn't move it much. It doesn't move it.
It's basically the same. The positive with this is you're just starting over. And would you rather start over or try and Band-Aid up a imperfect roster with a brand new head coach that frankly is just having a different scheme and a different mindset for the team?
Right. So that's why it's so hard to project this too, because like you said, it's a new offense. We can't just like say, well, what they did last year, it's not relevant anymore. It's a completely different staff. We don't know what they're going to be. We don't know how much similarities they're going to be. I don't think how much similarity there really is going to be from his previous scheme. Football's changed a lot. College football's changed a lot. So we'll see. At the end of the day, Sean, as I know we're going to wrap up here in a second.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the season's I'm still excited for the season to come, because just as natural, we want to see football. We want to go through the traditions. It's 3 months in the fall. It's all we get, Sean. So I'm not saying I'm not excited for it or I'm not looking forward to it, but I'm much more interested in what's happening off the field with UCF right now. That's where I'm at, because I hope they surprise the crap out of me this year and they make a bowl game. I would be over the moon if they won 6 games this year. I'm telling you that right now. If they won 6 games this year, we're throwing a party, because I just don't see that coming. But I hope they do. But I'm not even really worrying about it. This is year one. I'm taking the patient approach with everything, because I was not I was not in the group of like, we got to hire Scott Frost now. We need to. I was not in that group, but I'm willing to play it out. I'm willing to give the guy time, and I'm paying attention to what's happening off the field. We're getting into like recruiting season now. You're starting to see things happen. Still got a long ways to go until pen gets put to paper, obviously. Committing is whatever, but I think he's off to a decent start on the recruiting trail so far. Might not be the big names and they don't have the stars next to them like we've been used to seeing the past few years, but that's the part I'm looking forward to most. I don't know if you agree to it or what.
No, I would agree. And we're going to talk a lot about the commits probably that we have right now next week. I know I've been saying we're going to get to it. I think we're officially to that point where we can start mentioning some of these guys and kind of the recruiting outlook, if you will. But the last thing I'll say as we close this out is, like I said last week when we discussed Scott Frost's contract, there's a reason that they put that little extra year in if they made a bowl game this first year. It's because they do not feel that they will make a bowl game. Not that Scott Frost doesn't feel it, but Terry Mahajer most likely put that in saying you'd be ahead of schedule if you made a bowl game this year. So that's what they believe. If they overachieve and make a bowl game in year one, then everything is on an upward trajectory. If they win 3-4 games, you did what you were supposed to do. You won 3-4 games. It was your first year, brand new roster. But if UCF can win 6-7 games, then you're ahead of schedule. And that's where I think we can start looking and seeing what happens from there. All right, everybody, that's going to do it for this week's episode of Charge On. Please like, subscribe, comment, share. Do all that you do. Become a member. We would greatly, greatly appreciate it. This has been Charge On. We will see you next week.